The hospital ceiling had 47 tiles. I counted them 4 times during those endless nights when the monitors beeped and the nurses whispered outside my door. Not one of those ceiling tiles showed my daughter's face. Not one of those beeping machines announced her arrival. The doctor said my heart attack was mild, but there's nothing mild about lying alone in a hospital bed at 66, wondering if your only child remembers you exist. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. I've always been a simple man with simple needs. My name is David Thompson, and for 26 years I fixed broken things at Riverside Public Schools. Leaky faucets, flickering lights, squeaky doors. I made them work again. What I couldn't fix was the emptiness in our home after my wife Elizabeth died. Sarah was only 13 then, a skinny girl with her mother's eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest room. "It's just us now, kiddo," I told her the night after the funeral, as we sat at our kitchen table surrounded by casserole dishes from neighbors. "But we're going to be okay." She nodded, eyes red from crying, and I made a silent promise that night. Sarah would have everything her mother would have wanted for her. Everything. The day Elizabeth died, I became both father and mother. I learned to braid hair and shop for training bras. I packed lunches with little notes inside. I worked overtime and weekends to put money aside for college. When Sarah mentioned wanting to be a doctor someday, I picked up night shifts at the local warehouse. My hands grew calloused, my back ached constantly, but Sarah's future was worth every pain. "Dad, I got accepted to State University's pre-med program," she announced her senior year, waving the letter like a victory flag. The tuition was more than I made in a year. I smiled anyway. "That's wonderful, honey. I always knew you could do it." That night, I sold my father's watch, the only heirloom I owned, and put the money into Sarah's college fund. She never knew. College changed Sarah in ways I hadn't anticipated. Her phone calls became shorter, her visits home less frequent. When she did come home, she seemed uncomfortable, as if our small house had somehow shrunk while she was away. She'd glance at my work boots by the door, my flannel shirts, the simple furniture that had served us for decades. "Dad, why don't you update this place a little?" she'd suggest, scrolling through her phone. "It looks exactly the same as when I was in middle school." I'd shrug and say, "It works for me." What I didn't say was, every penny I saved went to her tuition, her books, her apartment rent near campus. When her car broke down junior year, I sold my own truck and drove an ancient Chevy that backfired at stoplights. When she needed money for a study abroad program in London, I cashed in the small life insurance policy Elizabeth had left. "You're the best, Dad," Sarah said over the phone from her dormitory. "I'll pay you back someday, I promise." I never expected repayment. Her success would be enough. By the time Sarah graduated from medical school, I barely recognized her. My work-worn hands looked out of place next to her manicured nails. My rural accent sounded jarring against her polished vocabulary. At her graduation dinner, I noticed her wince when I mispronounced hors d'oeuvres while talking to her professor. "Dad means appetizers," she corrected with a tight smile. "He's not used to fancy restaurants." The professor nodded kindly, but I saw the look that passed between them. Pity for the simple father who hadn't kept pace with his brilliant daughter. Sarah met Jonathan during her residency, a sharp-dressed lawyer with ambition in his eyes and confidence in his voice. Their wedding was an elaborate affair at a country club I could never afford to join. "We're keeping the guest list small," Sarah explained when I asked about inviting my co-workers from the school. "Jonathan's firm partners will be there, and space is limited." I nodded and wrote another check, my contribution to the wedding I couldn't afford. The ceremony was beautiful, though I felt like an extra in my rented tuxedo. During the reception, I overheard Jonathan asking Sarah if I was always so quiet. "He's just uncomfortable around successful people," she replied. "He spent his whole life fixing toilets in public schools." Each word was a small cut, but I smiled through the bleeding. After the wedding, the distance widened to a chasm. Sarah and Jonathan bought a house in an exclusive neighborhood 2 hours away. My calls went to voicemail. My texts received brief replies, sometimes days later. When their first child was born, I drove to the hospital with a handmade crib I'd spent months crafting. "Oh, Dad," Sarah said, looking uncomfortable. "That's thoughtful, but we've already ordered a nursery set from Europe. Maybe you could return this and just send a gift card instead." I took the crib back home and put it in the garage, where it gathered dust alongside my hopes of being an involved grandfather. Years passed this way. Christmas cards with professional family photos, brief calls on my birthday, occasional visits where Sarah checked her watch every 15 minutes. Her children, my grandchildren, knew me only as the old man they saw twice a year who brought toys their parents usually exchanged later. I kept working long after retirement age, saving every extra dollar for the life insurance policy I'd maintained faithfully since Elizabeth died. Sarah was the sole beneficiary, $750,000 that would someday ease whatever financial burdens she might face. It was my final gift, the culmination of a lifetime of sacrifice. Then came the morning when the pain crushed my chest like a vice. My neighbor Mark found me on the kitchen floor and called the ambulance. In the emergency room, between gasps and monitors, I asked the nurse to call my daughter. "Sarah Thompson, Dr. Sarah Martinez now. Please tell her I'm here." The message was delivered. The response came back by text. "In surgery all day. Can't get away. Keep me posted." 4 days I lay in that hospital room. 4 days of nurses changing IV bags, of doctors checking charts, of ceiling tiles that never changed their pattern. Mark visited daily, bringing magazines and sitting quietly beside my bed. Old colleagues from the school maintenance department brought cards, signed by teachers and students. The lunch ladies sent homemade soup in Tupperware containers. Sarah sent nothing, called nothing, was nothing. The morning I was discharged, Mark drove me home and helped me inside. "You should stay with me for a few days," he offered. "My spare room's all ready." I shook my head. "I've been a burden enough." "You've never been a burden, David," he said firmly. "That's what friends are for." His words echoed in my mind for weeks afterward as I recovered. What friends are for, what family should be for, the difference between those who showed up and those who didn't. 2 months after my heart attack, I made an appointment with my insurance agent. The small office smelled of coffee and printer paper as I settled into the chair across from Jim Baker, who'd handled my policies for 20 years. "What can I do for you today, David?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "I'd like to change the beneficiary on my life insurance policy." Jim looked surprised. "You've had Sarah listed since the beginning. That's a significant change." "I know." I handed him Mark's information. "I'd like to name Mark Lewis instead. He's been more family to me than—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Jim nodded slowly. "It's your policy, David. You have every right to change it. The paperwork will take about a week to process." What I didn't know was that Jim's nephew worked at the same hospital as Sarah. What I couldn't predict was how quickly gossip travels in small communities. 3 days later, my doorbell rang. Sarah stood on my porch, holding flowers and a bakery box. Behind her, Jonathan unloaded 2 sleepy children from their luxury SUV. "Surprise, Dad!" Her smile was bright but didn't reach her eyes. "We thought we'd spend the weekend with you. The kids have been begging to see their grandpa." I stood frozen, one hand on the door. The grandchildren, who barely knew my name, had been begging to see me. The daughter, who couldn't visit me in the hospital, had suddenly found a free weekend. "This is unexpected," I managed. "Can we come in?" Sarah's voice held an edge of impatience. I stepped aside, watching as my estranged family invaded my simple home. Jonathan immediately checked his phone for service. The children, Emma and Jacob, looked around with undisguised disappointment at the lack of entertainment options. "No Wi-Fi, kids," Jonathan announced. "Looks like we're going primitive this weekend." Sarah busied herself in the kitchen, arranging her store-bought cookies on my chipped plates. Dad, you really should update your appliances. These are ancient. I sat at my kitchen table, watching this performance unfold. They still work fine. But you could afford better ones, she said casually, not looking at me, especially with your pension and savings. I said nothing. That night, after a strained dinner where Sarah dominated the conversation with stories about her important patients and Jonathan's significant cases, she cornered me in the kitchen while I washed dishes. "Dad," she began, her voice softening to the tone she used with difficult patience. "I've been thinking about your finances lately." "Oogie, have you?" I continued, scrubbing a pot. "Yes, and I'm worried. You're getting older and healthcare costs can be overwhelming. I just want to make sure everything's in order with your arrangements." I dried my hands slowly. "My arrangements? You know, your will, your life insurance, those sorts of things." She tried to sound casual. "Is everything still the same as before?" The pot I'd been scrubbing was suddenly very interesting. "I'm reviewing some options." Sarah's smile flickered. "What kind of options?" "Just considering what's best." She placed her hand on my arm. "Dad, you know Jonathan and I can help with any financial decisions. He has connections with excellent estate planners." I looked into my daughter's eyes, Elizabeth's eyes, and saw only calculation. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. The next morning, Sarah appeared with breakfast and coffee. The children had been instructed to make handmade cards for Grandpa. Jonathan suggested a family portrait in the backyard. Sarah posted photos on social media with captions about treasuring family time and honoring our roots. None of it felt real. None of it was real. On Sunday afternoon, as they prepared to leave, Sarah handed me a thick envelope. "Dad, these are some insurance forms I printed out. I thought maybe we could go through them together, just to update your information." I took the envelope and set it aside. "I'll look at them later." But I could help you fill them out now," she pressed. "It would only take a few minutes." "I've got it handled, Sarah." Her smile faltered. "Are you sure? These things can be complicated." "I've been managing my own paperwork for 66 years, I said quietly. "I think I can handle a few forms." After they left, I opened the envelope. Inside were blank beneficiary change forms, with Sarah's information already filled in as the new recipient. In the corner of one page, she'd jotted down my policy number, which I'd never shared with her. She must have searched through my papers while I was occupied with the children. The next morning, I called Jim Baker and confirmed what I already knew in my heart. Sarah had contacted him directly, claiming to be helping me with paperwork. Jim, knowing better, had told her nothing. "I want to finalize that beneficiary change today," I told him. "And I'd like to write a letter to be kept with the policy, something to be given to Sarah after I'm gone." That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote everything I couldn't say to her face. How I'd worked extra shifts to pay for her dance lessons. How I'd gone without new clothes for years so she could have the latest fashions. How I'd skipped meals when money was tight but never let her go hungry. How I'd sold precious keepsakes to fund her education. How I'd watched her grow ashamed of me, the father who'd given everything. I signed the letter, sealed it, and delivered it to Jim's office, along with the finalized beneficiary change. "Are you sure about this, David?" Jim asked. "I've never been more sure of anything." 3 days later, Mark called to warn me. "Sarah came by the school looking for me. She was asking questions about your insurance policy. I didn't tell her anything, but she seemed pretty upset." I thanked him and hung up, knowing what was coming. The confrontation arrived with the evening thunderstorm. Sarah's car screeched into my driveway, and she burst through my front door without knocking. Her face was flushed, her designer outfit rumpled. "How could you?" she demanded, voice rising. "After everything we've done for you?" I set down my book. "What have you done for me exactly? We've included you in our lives. We've brought the children to see you. You've visited twice a year out of obligation," I interrupted calmly. "You didn't come when I had a heart attack. I was working. People's lives were in my hands, and I was alone in a hospital room, counting ceiling tiles." Sarah paced my living room. This is about the insurance policy, isn't it? You're punishing me because I have a busy life, because I can't drop everything whenever you want attention. The word attention hung in the air between us, as if a father wanting his daughter's presence during a life-threatening medical emergency was simply seeking attention. I'm not punishing you, I said quietly. I'm recognizing who showed up when it mattered. No, so you're giving everything to Mark, a janitor you worked with? What about your grandchildren's future? I stood up slowly, my old knees creaking. My grandchildren have two wealthy parents with successful careers. They'll be fine. Mark has been my friend for 30 years. He drove me to doctor's appointments. He brought me soup when I was sick. He remembered my birthday without being reminded. That's what friends do, she shouted. Family is different. Yes, I agreed. Family should do more, not less. Sarah's voice turned cold. If you do this, you'll never see the children again. The threat landed like a slap, but I'd been prepared for it. I barely see them now. You're making a terrible mistake, she warned. Jonathan and I could contest this in court. We could claim you're not mentally competent. I smiled sadly. Jim has been documenting our conversations for weeks. He has recordings of you trying to manipulate information out of him. Do you really want a judge to hear those? Sarah's face crumpled, not with genuine emotion, but with the frustration of a plan unraveling. I don't understand you. I'm your daughter, your only child. Yes, I said, and I gave you everything I had, my time, my money, my pride. I put you through college and medical school. I helped buy your first car. I contributed to your wedding. I never asked for anything in return except basic decency. So this is about gratitude? You want me to grovel because you did what parents are supposed to do? The words struck deep, revealing the vast gulf between us. In Sarah's mind, my sacrifices had been merely expected, not extraordinary. The nights I'd gone hungry, the dreams I'd abandoned, the loneliness I'd endured, all just baseline parenting in her eyes. No, I said finally. This is about choices. I chose to give you everything. Now I'm choosing to give something to someone who values me for who I am, not what I can provide. Sarah stood motionless in my living room, her expensive clothes and manicured nails marking her as a stranger in the house where she'd grown up. For a moment, I thought I saw something genuine flicker across her face, regret perhaps, or realization, but it vanished quickly. You'll regret this, she said coldly. When you're older and need care, don't call me. I wouldn't dream of it, I replied. I know better than to count on you when I'm in need. She left without another word, the door slamming behind her. Through the window, I watched her sit in her car for several minutes, furiously typing on her phone, probably texting Jonathan about their failed mission. The house felt eerily quiet after she left. I returned to my chair and picked up my book, but the words blurred before my eyes. Despite my resolve, the confrontation had drained me. This wasn't how I'd imagined my relationship with my only child would end. 3 weeks passed, without word from Sarah. I settled back into my routine. Morning coffee, newspaper, walks around the neighborhood. Mark and I met for lunch on Wednesdays at the diner near the school. Life continued, simpler but somehow more authentic than before. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my doorbell rang again. Sarah stood on the porch, alone this time. No designer outfit, no makeup, no calculated smile. Just my daughter in jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail like when she was young. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside, watching carefully for signs of another performance. She sat on the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." "Have you?" I remained standing. "Yes." She took a deep breath. "I found Mom's journals in our attic. I was looking for some old photos, and there was a box I'd never opened." My heart tightened. Elizabeth had kept detailed journals throughout our marriage, documenting our struggles and joys in her beautiful handwriting. "I spent the last week reading them," Sarah continued. "All the entries about how you worked 3 jobs when I was a baby. How you sold your baseball card collection to pay for my braces. How you skipped lunch for years to put extra money in my college fund. I said nothing. Mom wrote about how worried she was that you were working too hard, sacrificing too much. She wrote about arguing with you to keep something for yourself. Sarah's voice cracked. She wrote that you always said the same thing. Sarah will have every opportunity, even if it kills me. The familiar phrase hung in the air between us. Words I'd spoken to Elizabeth countless times. I never knew, Sarah whispered. I never understood what you gave up. You weren't supposed to, I said finally. That was the point. But I should have seen it. I should have recognized what was happening as I got older. Her eyes filled with tears. Instead, I became embarrassed by you, by your hands with dirt under the nails, by your accent that sounded too country for my sophisticated friends. She wiped her eyes. I was so concerned with appearing successful that I forgot what real success looks like. It looks like a father who works until his back gives out so his daughter can become a doctor. It looks like a man who eats ramen noodles so his child can have steak. I sat down heavily in my chair, suddenly tired. Why are you here, Sarah? Not for the insurance money, she said quickly. I want to be clear about that. You can leave it to Mark. He deserves it. Then what? A second chance? She met my eyes directly. Not as your beneficiary, but as your daughter. Just coffee sometimes. Maybe dinner once a month. Small steps. I studied her face, Elizabeth's eyes, my stubborn chin. Somewhere beneath the polished doctor was the little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder. Why should I believe you now? I asked. Because I'm not offering anything except time, she said simply. No promises, no grand gestures, just showing up consistently to rebuild whatever we can salvage. The sincerity in her voice sounded genuine, but I'd been fooled before. And Jonathan, the children? Jonathan and I are reassessing our priorities. She looked down at her hands. He wasn't happy about my change of heart. The children miss you, though, really miss you, not the pretend version I tried to manufacture. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows, the same sound that had accompanied many nights of homework help at this very table, Sarah's small hand in mine as we worked through math problems together. I can't promise anything, I said finally. Trust, once broken, is hard to repair. I know, she nodded. I'm just asking for a chance to try. I thought about Elizabeth, about what she would advise in this moment. My wife had been wiser than me, more forgiving of human failings. She would probably say that relationships, like the school buildings I maintained, sometimes needed major repairs to remain standing. Coffee, I said finally. Next Saturday, the diner on Maple Street. Sarah's smile, a real one this time, flashed briefly. I'll be there. As she stood to leave, she hesitated, then pulled something from her pocket. I found this in Mom's things too. I think she would want you to have it back. She placed my father's watch on the coffee table. The watch I'd sold 15 years ago to help pay for her freshman year textbooks. How did you? Mom tracked it down, Sarah explained. She wrote about finding the pawn shop and buying it back. She knew how much it meant to you. She was going to give it to you for your anniversary, but then she got sick. I picked up the watch, feeling its familiar weight in my palm. The face was still cracked on one side, the leather band worn thin, exactly as it had been when I'd reluctantly handed it over to the pawnbroker all those years ago. Thank you, I whispered. After Sarah left, I sat in the gathering darkness, turning the watch over in my hands. Its gentle ticking reminded me of something Elizabeth used to say. Time reveals the truth of who people are. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps time would reveal whether Sarah's change of heart was genuine or just another performance. Perhaps time would show whether the daughter I'd sacrificed everything for could become the person I'd always hoped she would be. In the meantime, I had coffee to look forward to on Saturday. A small step, but a step nonetheless. Not because of money or obligation or inheritance, but because of something more valuable. the possibility of redemption. The watch ticked softly in my hand, counting seconds toward whatever would come next. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, just click on the box on the screen. Thank you so much for listening.